Today, I'm going to tell you a story about two watches. One became a legend. The other was forgotten. And somewhere between these two stories is a third one, quieter, but maybe the most honest of all. It starts on a mountain, the highest mountain in the world. It's spring, 1953, in the Himalayas. A British expedition is making its final push towards the summit of Mount Everest. They've been climbing for weeks. The cold is unimaginable. The air is so thin that every breath feels like drowning. On their wrists, watches. Not one brand though, two. Rolex sent prototypes. Swiss-made precision instruments with a reputation to prove. These weren't the polished Explorers you see in the shop windows today. These were pre-production pieces, experimental and raw, testing grounds for what would become one of the most iconic watch designs in history. Smiths sent theirs too, the A409, built in England by the last great British watchmaker. Quiet, confident, ready. Both watches had the same job to do, survive where nothing else could. Clean black dials, luminous markers you could read in the storm, movements built to resist shock and the freezing cold. These weren't fashion statements, these were real tools, life or death tools. And on May the 29th, 1953, one of them reached the top of the world. Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary stood at 8,848 metres, the roof of the earth. They took a photograph. Hillary is exhausted, frost on his gear, but triumph in his eyes. And on his wrist, a Smiths. The Rolex was on the expedition, no question. But that day, at that moment, it was the Smiths that made it. When the news of the summit broke, the world erupted. Everest, unconquered for centuries, had finally been climbed. And Rolex moved fast. Ads went out within days. First to the summit of Everest, Rolex. It wasn't a lie. Well, not exactly. Rolex was on the expedition, but it wasn't the watch in the photo. Smiths released their own statement, modest, maybe a little bit British, saying, "Congratulations to the expedition. All equipped with Smiths watches. Well done, chaps." Well, they didn't say the well done, chaps, but you get the idea. And, well, then they went quiet. Because Smiths didn't have Rolex's marketing machine, they didn't have the global reach, the storytelling power. Within a few years, Rolex turned the Everest climb into mythology. They launched the Explorer, officially designated as reference 6350 in 1953, then evolving into the 6610 in 1959. 36mm, black dial, those distinctive 369 Arabic numerals, Mercedes hands, a design that distilled adventure into steel. It became iconic, a blueprint that every field watch since has borrowed from. Smiths? Well, they've just faded. British watchmaking collapsed in the 70s and 80s, and the A409 became a footnote. But the thing about myths is that they're not always about truth. Sometimes they're just about meaning. Fast forward to today. Walk into any Rolex authorised dealer, if you can get an appointment, and ask for an Explorer. They'll show you the current reference, the 124270. 36mm, just like the original, that same black dial, the same 369 numerals, but now it's powered by the caliber 3230, a movement with 70 hours of power reserve, and Rolex's Chronology escapement. The price, well, around $6,300 or $7,250 in the US. But there's a catch. You probably won't get one. Well, not right away anyway. The Explorer sits on waiting lists, sometimes for months, sometimes longer. Because it's not just a watch anymore, it's a Rolex. It's status, it's investment, it's the story of Everest condensed into 36mm of steel. In 2021, Rolex briefly made a 39mm version, the 214270. Bigger, more wrist presence, and honestly, some people loved it. But in typical Rolex fashion, they soon brought back the 36mm case, listening to purists who believed the Explorer should stay true to its roots. If you want the history without the weight, well, there's always the vintage market. A 1960s reference 1016, the Explorer that defined the collection for decades, will run you anywhere from around £9,000 to £15,000-ish in the UK, depending on the condition. But you're not just buying a watch, you're buying the watch, the myth and the legend. Now let's talk about the watch that history almost forgot. After Smith's watchmaking died in the 1980s, the A409 became, well, a curiosity, something you'd find in your grandfather's drawer, something collectors whispered about. But in 2016, something remarkable happened. A British enthusiast named Eddie Platts, through his company Time Factors, brought Smiths back to life. He didn't just slap a logo on the generic watch, he studied the original A409, measured it, recreated it. He wanted to honour what made it special. The result? The Smiths Everest PRS-25. It's 36mm, stainless steel, that same honest dial with the Arabic numerals, powered by a Miyota 9039 movement. Japanese reliability in a British body. The price is around about £595, so that's about, $750? But check current prices. There's no waiting list, no authorised dealer games. You order it online and it arrives. And here's what's beautiful. It feels like the spirit of 1953, not the myth, the actual moment. Because the original Smiths wasn't trying to be luxurious, it was trying to be, useful, and the PRS-25 carries forward that DNA. There's also the PRS-29A, a slightly updated version with a date window and a Sellita SW200 movement. For those who want Swiss mechanics, that one runs at about £800, give or take. Time Factors make them in small batches. Sometimes they'll sell out, but they come back. There's no artificial scarcity, no hype machine. Just a small British company making watches the way they used to, with purpose. Put them next to each other today, the modern Explorer and the Smiths PRS-25. They're remarkably similar. Same size, same design language, same philosophy. But one costs 10 times more than the other. Why? Well, the Rolex has better finishing, smoother edges, a bracelet that feels like liquid metal, a movement that's chronometer certified and built to last generations. But the Smiths? Well, it keeps time just as well, and it's just as readable, just as tough. But what you're really paying for with the Rolex is the story, the heritage, the myth of Everest. With the Smiths, you're paying for, actual history and the watch that was there. And honestly, both are valid choices. Both are beautiful in their own way. One is a legend you wear, the other is maybe a secret you keep. And then there's a third story, which may be apocryphal and one that certainly didn't make it into the ads, but I like to think it's true. Years later, a Sherpa named Kama Tezering was asked about the 1953 expedition. He remembered something small, something no one had written about. When Hillary summited Everest, he said, he gave the Sherpas watches as a bonus. We learned how to tell the time using those watches. Think about that for a moment. We don't know what brand they were. There's no model name, no serial number, not even a photo in an ad. Just simple anonymous watches left on the wrists of the men who carried the loads, fixed the ropes and made the climb possible. And those watches, they changed something. They turn mountain time, measured by sun and shadow, into something you could wear, something mechanical, something more modern. No marketing team and no legend. It was just a tool doing what tools do best, changing the way people live. So there we are, 3 watches, 3 stories. The Rolex became a legend because it understood something powerful. People don't just buy function, they buy meaning. They buy the story of who they could be. When you wear an Explorer, you're not just wearing a watch, you're wearing the summit, the conquest, the impossible made possible. And Rolex deserves credit for that. They took a moment in history and turned it into something eternal. That's not manipulation, it's craft, the craft of storytelling. Smiths did its job at 8,848 metres, then just disappeared into history. Honest, but forgotten. But now, thanks to people like Eddie Platts, it's back. Not as a luxury item, but as a watch, as a tool, the way it always meant to be. And those Sherpa watches, well, they were never meant to be remembered, but they might be the purest expression of what a watch really is. Because when design is truly functional, when it serves without asking for credit, it doesn't need to shout. So, which watch really conquered Everest? Was it the one that built the legend and carries it forward 70 years later? Refined, coveted, waiting on lists? Or the one that was actually there, now reborn for a few £100, carrying the same honest spirit it had in 1953? Or the ones that stayed behind, ticking quietly on Sherpa wrists, unnoticed by history, but changing lives all the same? Well, maybe the answer is all three, because every great story has more than one truth. And sometimes the best designs are the ones we almost forgot to remember. If you want the myth, save up for the Explorer. Join the wait list, it's certainly worth it. If you want the history, get the Smiths. You'll be surprised how good it feels. And if you want the lesson, well, remember those Sherpa watches, the ones with no name. Because the best tool is the one that disappears into your life and just works. Let me know what you think in the comments, and thanks for watching.